Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to give one more minute just for some people to come in because it looks like we've still got a lot of people coming in from the waiting room. So bear with us 1 minute and we will get started very shortly.
How do I do that?
Okay, looks like we've got a good group coming in to join us today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So a couple things before I introduce our speakers today. My name is Elizabeth Grable. I'm on the board of HBSWA, and we are very happy to welcome you here to our event today on corporate trauma. There's a couple things, just admin things that I want to get to. So first and foremost, we will probably mute, but if you guys can each mute yourselves. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have some time for Q&A. So you can do two things. You can put your question in the chat, or you could unmute yourself at the end when we have, and we'll call on people. If you raise your hand, we can have you ask your question. But do feel free to go ahead and post them in the chat along the way because we'll be out. Otherwise, please mute yourself and we will get through the presentation so that we can have some questions at the end. Secondly, for those of you that are participating today, if you're able to go into the rename function on your picture, we would love it if you could rename your Zoom box with your name and your HBS degree, just so everybody can kind of see where everybody is from. And that's it. So please mute yourself and use the chat. So today I wanted to take this opportunity to just tell us we've two very extraordinary women who have been working for a very long time in executive coaching and workplace resilience. So we would like to introduce to you Ilse French and Louise Bradshaw. Ilse and Louise are partners in the business When Pigs Fly, which is an executive coaching and professional coaching consultancy. And Ilse and Louise are going to tell you a little bit about themselves through the course of the presentation. But more importantly, we are just so happy to have them here because their background is incredibly deep. They've been working for decades in not just theory and technique, but actually helping real people to understand how to be more resilient in the workplace. And Ilse comes with a background of 15 years as a partner at PwC in leadership positions. She knows workplace very, very well, and we're very happy to have her here today with her expertise as a certified coach, and very much also happy to have her here as a graduate of HBS from the AMP program. So Ilse will be presenting today with her partner, Louise Bradshaw. And Louise is a co-founder of When Pigs Fly, also with more than 17 years of experience in helping clients coach to professional and personal results that improve their resilience in their life. So we're very happy to have her here as well. She is very experienced in leading workshops with individuals and organizations to develop a healthy and happy workplace. So that is the core of our topic today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Ilse and Louise, and we'll look forward for your questions from the chat or raising your hand at the end after the presentation, and we will go into Q&A. So Ilse, I would like to pass things over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that great introduction. We are so excited to be talking to this group today, especially around the topic of corporate trauma, because there's really not much written about corporate trauma. It's not spoken about that often. And most people still deny that it actually exists. Yes, we are seeing that it's the main reason for lots of our clients feeling stuck in the workplace, feeling anxious, and just feeling unhappy. And that is why it's so important to get the message out there that this is actually a reality that we all are facing. And even after they leave their corporate careers, they still struggle to reach their full potential because of the impact that this has had on them. Like one of our clients said the other day, it's kind of corporate deprogramming that you need to go through once you've been exposed to these kind of environments. Yeah, the good news is this can be overcome and it doesn't need to be a reality. And we hope that, you all agree with us after this talk today. Now, just how we will be structuring it today is we'll first talk a bit about what corporate trauma is, because of course there isn't a real definition out there if you look at any textbook. And then we will take it from there and look at how it manifests, and then talk to you about 7 strategies you can use to build some resilience. Sorry, I just want to move this slides, which sorry, they don't seem to be moving. There they go. Yes, I'm just going to hand over to Louise to just give you some background on how we have defined corporate trauma.
Okay, hi everyone. So first off, we kind of wanted to differentiate a little bit between what people ordinarily see as trauma and what we see as corporate trauma. So when we're looking at what we would call regular trauma, we tend to think of sort of deeply distressing incidences or experiences that overwhelm the individual's ability to cope. And that can be a single event trauma, like something like an attack or a car accident, or that can be a more prolonged trauma in the case of something like a domestic abuse relationship. With corporate trauma, what we're finding is it tends to be more of a long-term thing. So it's the long-term impact of behaviour and the way that we cognitively perceive behaviours that overwhelms our psyche and ability to cope, generally more than a single incident trauma, unless of course we're looking at different kind of workplaces, but generally corporate, it tends to be a long-term thing. And it results from things within the workplace that we experience, like critical bosses, being overlooked for promotions, the constant threat of redundancy, bullying by peers, that sort of thing. So there is a bit of a differentiation between what we would traditionally think of as trauma and what we see as corporate trauma. But as Ilse said, there really isn't much of a definition out there at the moment. So this was just a little question that we sort of wanted you all to ponder on, and perhaps put some answers in the chat for us. But if you're at the end of next year and telling someone you had the best year at work, what would have changed in the behaviours of colleagues and peers during the past 21 months that made you feel that this had been the best year? So if people just have a little think and pop anything in the chat that comes up. Yes, valued, recognised, transparency, collaboration, feeling appreciated, recognised and secure. Yeah, so safety is a big one as well. And the value, feeling valued, safe and valued. Yes. Yeah, inclusivity. Yeah, supported and safe place to work partnership. Absolutely. A lot of the things that we kind of come up in our work with clients where there has been instances of corporate trauma, the same sort of thing, not feeling valued, not feeling safe, not feeling included, that sort of thing. Trusting my manager and peers. Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at this, what we can see coming from this is it's a lot around feeling part of it and also feeling safe and secure within that. And that's where we find a lot of trauma, particularly in the corporate workplace, comes from, is the sense of not feeling safe, and we'll get onto that in a minute, and not feeling valued, trusted, etc. Thank you everybody for your input. Ilse's my slide lady, so Ilse, would you mind?
Yeah, I'm struggling to move these slides. That's weird. Yeah. I don't see that. There we go. So why is it more prevalent today? It's something that we weren't that exposed to 10 years ago, and people weren't even referring to something like trauma in the workplace. And the short answer to that is there's a lot more pressure. And it's pressure coming from various sources. It's the high expectations from shareholders in terms of performance. It is the constant need to stay relevant. It's social proof has become a big issue. Then we're dealing with much fiercer competition, volatile economic conditions, and then the customer demands. Everything needs to be happening today. It needs to be better, and it needs to satisfy so many more needs. So when you look in organizations, all of these pressures are put on the top management. And unfortunately, when they are faced with this kind of anxiety and these kind of pressures, being a considerate human being is often forgotten in those places. And then all of this cascades one way, and that is onto the employee. And that creates the additional pressure that then causes a lot of this trauma if it is already there in the belief system, which we will cover in a minute. Now, how does it manifest? There's so many scenarios in the workplace where it manifests. Let's take an example of you've worked all weekend, you've got a strategy committee meeting on Monday morning. You walk into that meeting and you are bombarded with questions. They tell you this is good, but have you considered X, Y, Z? Have you spoken to Paul about this? I thought that we have already done this and it hasn't worked previously. Yes, we should have been doing this 2 weeks ago. You know, I'm just reflecting back on my corporate career, or even being told like, you are just getting ahead of yourself. You should have spoken to someone else before you've taken on this assignment. So all of these things then create and provoke certain emotions within us. And this is then the way that we would typically react in those situations if we start facing these kind of questions.
And from the question I asked earlier and the answers that we got in the chat, if you look at it in terms of safety and in terms of feeling valued, and quite often when we don't understand necessarily how something is manifesting in modern times, it's quite good to look back at sort of our ancestors and what it might mean to them. So if we look at it in terms of a corporate career, we're part of the tribe within that corporate. Now, if we take that back to our ancestors, if we were rejected from the tribe in some way, or we didn't fit in, we weren't valued, then we may have been cast out. And if we're cast out back in those days, then that would have ultimately led to death because we couldn't survive on our own. We needed the collective to be part of that. And within us still, you know, in terms of evolution, it's not kind of been bred out of us yet, this kind of automatic need to be part of the tribe and this fear of being rejected. And this is partly why, you know, breakups, redundancies, that sort of thing hit people so hard, because there is that sense of being rejected. So when we're in a workplace and, as Ilse just said, we're going into a meeting where everybody's looking at us and then we're being questioned, our values being questioned, what we're doing is being questioned, then understandably that's going to create some anxiety as it is. But then if we add in the added element of rejection from the tribe, then we're potentially looking at consequences that can have more of a serious psychological impact on us. So rejection from the tribe is quite a big one. The next thing we're going to be looking at is the responses that we have to this. So we have a fear response, and most people are quite sort of comfortable with the fight, flight and freeze response. But what they found actually is there's a fourth element to this. So there's a flop response. So the flop response comes from, and I'm going to go through all of these, comes from our reptilian complex at the back of our head. And what that is I don't know if anybody's ever seen someone that passes out at the sight of blood. What that is our reptile brain. So our reptiles, the only way that they were able to deal with a predator was they played dead. So lizards, snakes, etc. tend to play dead when threatened. So one of our most primal responses to fear is to play dead. Now, in the most extreme version, this is, you know, in the case of passing out through fear, But in a less extreme version, it may be that we become very demotivated. We may have low mood. We may feel depressed. Maybe that just sort of sense of, I think the kids nowadays say meh, which I think kind of sums it up quite nicely. It's that sort of sense of, you know, I haven't got anything left to give. So we've got the flop response. We've got the freeze response, which in a corporate environment is going to be, you're in a meeting, someone questions you about something, you're unable to even get the words out. You're totally frozen, you can't respond, you can't get up and leave, you just sat there frozen. We've got the flight response, which is quite often we hear people that have had to run off to the toilets, have a bit of a cry, compose themselves and come back, or even people in more extreme cases have just left the building and gone home and not been able to come back. And then we've got the fight response. And I think we've all seen this in different environments where someone feels threatened. So they come out as quite aggressive. They start pointing out faults of other people, or it might come out that they work harder in order to prove themselves. But that's done from a sort of almost a place of kind of anger and potentially bitterness, rather than just a normal drive to move forward. Now, out of these responses, the most damaging one in terms of trauma they've found is freeze. Because ordinarily, if we're able to get away from a situation, or if we were attacked by a tiger, say, for example, if we're able to escape or able to fight it off, then we're less likely to suffer from the impact of trauma or something like post-traumatic stress disorder than if we freeze. Because once we freeze, our body becomes paralyzed, and it's that sense of we can't do anything about this. So there's some good techniques that we've got later on to help you move out of this freeze response if that's where you end up, because that is the one that tends to have the most damaging impact. Flop obviously is not ideal either. If we can move on, please, Ilse. Oh, this is you, isn't it?
So, yeah, this is me 12 years ago during a CNBC Africa interview. Now, to the world, I looked successful, I was knowledgeable, in control, but inside, I was feeling completely insecure. I was depressed, I was anxious. And on a daily basis, these kind of thoughts went through my mind. I just must do better. I'm not adding enough value. And, you know, I'm sure many of you do also resonate with some of these. I need to work harder. If I don't say yes, I won't get promoted. And, you know, others are just doing better than me. And I was justifying this to myself through the behaviors that I perceived from others. So she didn't respond to my email. My boss didn't respond to my question in a meeting. Just the way that they looked at me, I must have done something wrong. No one said I actually did a good job. So these justifications kept on playing over and over in my mind. And even when I left my corporate career on the 14th of February 2018, I still vividly remember that day. I thought, oh, thank God I've left all of these things behind me, and I can now start a new chapter. Now, little did I know that the worst was probably yet to come, because these beliefs kept on playing in my mind. And then, of course, they kept holding me hostage towards driving to a point of burnout in trying to prove myself. So what then was probably the best thing that happened to me and changed all my outcomes was the ability to understand, question, and change my beliefs. Now, that had a profound impact, not only on myself, but also in the way that I then was able to understand why other people behave in a certain way. And that's very empowering. So once you understand how beliefs work, you can also understand that things are not really your fault. It's often based on that other person's belief system. Now, that brings us to the root of all of this, is really what is a belief. And a belief is what you consider to be true or to be the facts about yourself, about the world, about humanity. And it's in a way the kind of rules which we choose to live our lives by, or you can, and then how we will react in each situation based on these kind of rules. So you can kind of think of it as the Google Maps of the world, but these are different because everyone has got their own Google map and it is very subjective. Now, our beliefs are formed in our brain, which is the most powerful engine that there is on Earth, but we're spending more time trying to operate Chat GPT than our mobile phones than learning how to operate our brain. And our brain has got the three engines, the engines around thinking, feeling, and behaving. Now, at the root of all of this is our core beliefs and our limiting beliefs, and they are held in our subconscious. 95% of them are there. And we often think that we are the bus driver, but we are just the passenger because it's all happening and rooted in the subconscious. And these core beliefs are already formed by the age of 7. And they, the most common ones, which at least all of us have got one or two of them, is I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I'm not lovable. Other people cannot be trusted, and then I'm not worthy. So these may root from, you can't get an ice cream because you didn't do well enough today. So then it gets that I'm just not good enough. And these examples are not only childhood examples, but they can happen throughout events and triggers during our life. So it's never the situation that's really the big problem, but it's really our belief around the situation, and our belief is formed when we start using our beliefs to filter these, and we are so good to delete, distort, and to generalize. Think about you wanting to buy a red car. Then all of a sudden you start seeing all of these red cars on the road to justify that a red car is actually the right color car for you to buy. Now, if we can just look at an example here on how this kind of confirmation bias happens is if you got a core belief of I'm not good enough, then you are going to integrate certain information based on events that happen to you. You're going to reject others and you're going to modify other information. So let's look at an example here. I feel that I'm not good enough. It may stem from events that's happened previously in my life. So when the company did not respond to my job application, immediately I say, yes, I'm not good enough. But what am I rejecting? I'm rejecting the fact that I've been headhunted for other positions, and I'm modifying the fact that I only got the fact that I got a second interview. I'm telling myself I only got a second interview because others were terrible. So that is how our filtering processes keep on happening in our brain. If we take the example at the bottom, my boss gave me some negative feedback at work, so I really know I'm not good enough, but I'm ignoring the fact that my colleagues constantly ask me for advice, and I'm modifying the fact that I got a bonus by saying, I got a bonus, but everyone else got one, so it doesn't mean I'm good enough. So it's our core beliefs that that are absolutely crucial in how we react in certain situations. And it's not only of how we react, but also how other people will react based on their belief system of the map of the world.
Okay, so now we're going to come on to 7 strategies that we've come up with, and a large proportion of this has come from my previous work as a therapist with trauma victims, people that experienced serious crime. So these are kind of all modified for use within the corporate environment. So it's allowing you to build resilience to stress, but also to manage any kind of stress or trauma that is happening in the moment. Ilse, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Okay, so positive belief, we've already talked about beliefs, but if we're going to tie this into trauma, what we're thinking here and looking at is the fact that if we have healthy, positive beliefs about ourselves and about others, we are less likely to be traumatized by events that happen in the workplace. So if, for example, I have a belief that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, then if there's a difficult colleague or a critical boss or I get bad feedback, I'm much more likely to experience trauma symptoms from that than I am if I have a very healthy sense of self and belief in the world. So beliefs are kind of the cornerstone for resilience, really. If there's anything that I could tell you to work on in terms of becoming resilient to stress, it would be your beliefs. So we can use things like cognitive reframing, which I'm going to go through in a moment. There's a slide further on. Positive affirmations in alpha brain state. So I expect everybody's heard about doing positive affirmations. Now, the issue with affirmations is that when we say them in a sort of normal brainwave state, so we're in beta brainwave most of the time when we're awake, what happens is there's a faculty called the conscious critical faculty in hypnotherapy, and it's kind of the gatekeeper to the subconscious. So when we try to, in the normal brainwave state, we try to put in a new belief, what happens is that bounces it out because it contradicts the belief that we already hold about ourselves. So what we need to do in order to make it more impactful with affirmations, we need to do them at least alpha brainwave state. So alpha brainwave we're in when we're either just going to sleep or we're just waking up. So if you're looking at getting, you're wanting a new and healthier positive belief, the best time to do this is to record yourself saying the positive belief, and it needs to be written in the positive or said in the positive. So I am good enough. And we need to be doing that just as we're dropping off to sleep or just as we're waking up in the morning. We don't want to be doing it in a brainwave state that's more active like beta. So in an alpha, the gatekeeper or the conscious critical faculty is more open to suggestion. So that's kind of the best time. And then what that will allow to happen is for a new neural pathway with a positive belief to be formed, sorry. And the more that we repeat that belief to ourselves in those alpha brainwave states, the more that neural pathway is going to be laid down. And over time, the old pathway with the negative belief will start to be synaptically pruned and taken away. So that's a little top tip for if you want to create a more positive belief, do it at those particular times. And now I think, Ilse, if we can go on to cognitive reframing. So when we talked earlier about the confirmation bias, this is a way to overcome the confirmation bias. So what we look at is what we call reframing. So we're just putting something, the piece of information that's coming, and looking at a different, more positive alternative interpretation of that. So rather than my boss, was a bit grumpy this morning, so my boss must hate me, we can flip that around, and we have to do this. We have to be quite firm with ourselves with this. But okay, my boss is having a bad day. So that's the kind of negative, and then there's the positive reframe of that. I'll be happy when, this is a classic one for everybody, and then we put off the next stage of happiness. I'll be happiness when I get the promotion, then I'll be happiness when I'm CFO, then I'll be happy when I'm CEO. So for now, we want to look at what can I do to feel happy now? I'm happy now because I've got this nice cup of tea. I'm happy now because I'm getting to share this with you guys. Things like I'm not qualified for that role. We can reframe that. I'm a quick learner and I'll figure it out. I can get support, that sort of stuff. So it's being able to sort of flip the script on the negative things that we're saying to ourselves. And the more we do this, the more our brain adapts and becomes, neuroplasticity allows us to become automatically more positive, which is going to make us more resilient to stress, negative behaviours, and consequently trauma. Ilse, would you mind flipping for me? Thank you. Okay, so the first thing I said to you about building resilience was having positive beliefs. That would be my number one. My number two would be managing stress levels and working on your vagal tone. So things to manage stress levels, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is gentle exercise. We do breathing exercises, setting and accomplishing challenges for ourselves, and building vagal tone, as we've got here. So vagal tone is, if you think of it a bit like muscle tone, so we've got our vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. And the vagus nerve deals with all our autonomic responses. So it deals with heart rate, breathing, digestion, that sort of thing. It also controls our autonomic nervous system, which is our fight flight response and our rest and digest response. And what we're looking for with vagal tone is we want to be able to go up very quickly on the response, so the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight flight, but we want to be able to come down very quickly on the rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic response. Because what we're looking for is being able to respond to a situation, then calm down very quickly. We don't want to be staying up here long term. The longer term we stay up here, the more likely we are to become traumatized. So if we want to build vagal tone, there's lots of different things that we can do. There's breathing exercises. Now, if we're going to do a breathing exercise, the most important thing is to make sure that we breathe out for longer than we breathe in for. So the in-breath stimulates the sympathetic, the fight flight. That's why when people are having a panic attack, they just keep breathing in, they don't breathe out. The out-breath stimulates the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So we want to be breathing in and then making sure that we do an extended out-breath. That's just going to help if you practice that and integrate that into your sort of daily routine. That's going to help to build vagal tone. I mean, this is a whole workshop in itself, so I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on a few bits. Cold water therapy is another good one for building vagal tone. What we want to do is go warm to cold to warm, because that stresses our nervous system just a little bit, but just enough for it to go up and down. So in the shower, warm, cold, warm, out, job done. Anything which stimulates the vocal cords, because the vagus nerve runs down the back of the throat. So humming, singing, singing on your commute to work, you'd be surprised at the difference that's going to make, or on the way back. So yes, those are just a few little bits to kind of help to build vagal tone, which is just going to make you more resilient to stress. In terms of building resilience, we want to be looking at sort of setting boundaries, becoming aware of our values and being able to communicate those, because that's going to protect us more from stress, which is then going to protect us more from trauma. Oh, we seem to have switched. Okay. Sorry, that's thrown me ever so slightly. So things like, engaging in other activities, setting ourselves challenges. So whether that be running a marathon or a 5K or whatever it is that you want to challenge yourself to, the more we challenge ourselves and overcome them, the more resilient we are. And strengthening relationships outside of the workplace, actually inside and outside of the workplace, because we co-regulate with other people. That's part of being part of that tribe. So that's why babies, like calm down when they're held by their mother, and that's why cuddles with your dog or your partner can be very, very soothing. So our nervous system meets their nervous system and we regulate. So the more that we can build up supportive relationships, the more resilient we are to stress and trauma. And we can go on to the next one. So shaking. Now this one sounds very odd. Basically what they found is that children who have been, they did studies with natural disasters, that sort of thing. They found that children tend to be less traumatized than the adults. And what they found was that the children didn't moderate their normal shaking response, their trembling response. They quite naturally shook all the way through whatever event was happening. The adults, because we've been conditioned and we try to put on a brave face, or us British to stiff up a lip, what they tended to do was suppress their natural response to shake. And what they found is that shaking actually, it releases muscle tension, it stimulates the vagus nerve, so it helps us to calm down and regulate our nervous system, and it burns off excess adrenaline. So if you ever watched a wildlife program and there's a sort of antelope running away from a lion, once it's got away, what it'll do is shake all over before it resumes feeding. And that's going from the sympathetic, so the fight flight, to the parasympathetic, so it's resting and digesting because it's eating. And it's just shaking off that nervous energy, that excess adrenaline, relaxing its muscles and so on and so forth, regulating its nervous system. So you can actually physically, if you're in a situation at work you notice that you're starting to become very, very stressed, very anxious, you might freeze, or you might want to run away or hide. One of the best things you can do is take yourself off to the toilet and actually physically allow yourself to shake all over, because that will calm your nervous system and you're less likely to then go on and experience a sort of trauma response from this. So probably not something to be done in public, but take yourself off somewhere and have a good shake all over. You'll be surprised at the impact it has on your nervous system. Okay, can we go on to the next one? I think this is yours, Ilse.
Yes. Louise briefly mentioned setting of boundaries as a way of building resilience. Now, setting boundaries always sounds much easier than what it really is. Because if I was to ask you today, what are your values on which you basing your boundaries, then many of you, in fact, 80% of people they found will not know what their real values are. Now, why that is, the values is actually in our subconscious once again. So when you start doing a paper exercise of soliciting your values, immediately you will go to those values that you were conditioned as a child or throughout your career or by society to have. So those are the things that you think you should be having. And then, of course, we're dealing with women more struggling to set boundaries than men. And yes, I think, if you just think a moment about it, the reasons of that is how we brought up. And that's why I specifically included this artwork here of women of I must compromise. It's the culture effect, it's society effect of what is really the role of a woman. So this is really a tough one for many women to deal with. Now, what I've found in working with clients, some of the ways that you can yourself, without spending time in really focusing deep on the subconscious, start looking at your values, is asking yourself, what really makes you happy? What are you passionate about in life? What are your kind of accomplishments that you are feeling proud of? But then also asking the question of, when was the last time that you felt anxious about something, or when did someone really upset you? Because then
Bring the
someone
water,
really
the
has
fruit up from outside,
impacted your
or and also change this water bottle.
Hi, could everybody please mute themselves? Thank you.
Because then you'll know what are the kind of values that's been overstepped in the situation. And that worked really well for me, is to take it from that kind of angle. So once you know what your values are, your next challenge is going to be trying to communicate your boundaries based on the values. And communication again goes back to the topic of confidence and having confidence to enforce in what you believe in. Now, if you still got these kind of limiting beliefs of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and others can't be trusted, then you are going to struggle in having the confidence to communicate, because you will communicate a no, but you will very soon be convinced that you may be wrong in what you've done, that little voice in your head. So it's important to, again, start with that kind of beliefs and then go on to onto these kind of communications around the boundaries. Now, what is normally a good start is to think about a situation that you are in, and then to decide whether it's something that you feel strong about or something that you will consider, but on different terms. So if you are feeling strong about it, then making statements like, I'm sorry, but I can't do this right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed. That is a good way of communicating it. Or when you say something like this, you are upsetting me. Or I do need my private time now. I cannot deal with this matter straight away. And those are actually important to build trust and respect. I often say that when you say yes to things that you don't want to do, it actually means saying no to those things that you are passionate about and that's actually your values. And you should always remember that. Or something I wrote about today was like saying yes does not mean that you're going to be popular. In fact, it means that you can be quite a pushover. So always go back to those kind of considerations when you think about how you're going to respond in a situation. But then also don't be afraid to set your conditions and your terms on which you'll do something. Yes, I would do this work, but it will mean I won't be able to do X, Y, Z today. Or I'm happy to work overtime on Thursday, but then I would really like to take some time off early on Friday to pick up my children. Or yes, I'm happy to do this, but here's my rates to complete this job. And these are easy starters. I've worked with clients that were just too afraid to even go and ask for a promotion that are due to them. All the evidence are there, but because they've had previous situations where they were told in other jobs, you know, you are not good enough, you're not worthy, those kind of things were holding them back. Once they worked on that, in fact, a lady I've recently worked with, she was able to get a 30% salary increase just based on working belief system and knowing how to communicate your boundaries and stick to your values. Now, number 6 there is so important. Your workplace is not your world. Now, given remote working, it's really become convoluted between what is the workplace, what is work. But there it's important, you know, as Louise also mentioned, to have that kind of side hustle, to have that hobby. It needs to be something that you're really passionate about and takes your focus completely off the office politics, the culture issues at work. Because what happens is when you have that kind of traumatic experience at work, you get into the car, you play that event over and over in your head while you're in the car, while you're on the tube or train. And then by the time you get home, it starts impacting everyone around you. Your partner would say, oh no, we are not talking about Paul again today. And then by the time you go to bed, you cannot sleep and you toss and turn. So when you've got that kind of side hobby and something that you're passionate about, it allows you to relax in those kind of situations. Then also remember the strength of having good relationships outside of work. It's also those people that you can talk to and you can trust. They can be more than just a mentor when you are faced with these, because it does help to offload, as Louise mentioned there as well. And then the number 7, change your environment. Now, there's a lot that we all need to tolerate in the workplace, in our life, but being in a toxic environment is not one of those. Thinking about it, if you were to walk down the road and you see a pile of toxic waste, you will avoid going through that at all costs because it will impact your health. It is exactly the same when you're in a toxic workplace. If you do not foresee a way of having that kind of protective clothing and to help you combat the implications that it has for your health, you have to get out of that environment.
So we wanted to look here about breaking the cycle. So, you know, corporate trauma is not the new normal. However, post-traumatic growth, which is the growth that happens with positive psychological changes after traumatic experiences that can help excel outcomes. So please don't think that corporate trauma has to be the end. As Ilse said, there's lots of strategies you can use to help with it. However, if it is that bad and it's not changing, then it is time to get out. And remember that we can't control the behaviours of others, but we can control the impact it has on us, or we allow it to have on us. And if there's one thing I wanted you to kind of take away from today, is to think about how your beliefs about yourself, the world, and others are impacting on your quality of life, and whether that's something that really needs to change for you to go on and live a stress-free, non-traumatized life.
Thanks, Louise. I should have mentioned it probably at the outset, but what we're covering today is probably belongs in a 2 to 3 day full workshop. So we're really just giving you kind of the highlights of what we're seeing. We're giving you some easy things that you can start implementing today in the workplace or in stressful situations that you may find yourself in. A bit on When Pigs Fly. Our focus is to help people build confidence, accelerate success, and live their happiest lives. And we do that through Outcomes Accelerator, which we have developed, whereby we achieve life-changing results in just 6 sessions. And that's the kind of results that normally take months of coaching, even years to achieve. And we do this through a process where we identify your triggers. We are then able to help you remove those negative beliefs and also replace those with positive beliefs. Now, the strength of replacing them with positive beliefs is, if you think about something like confidence, there's many techniques you can learn today how to be confident. And then say you need to go and do a presentation or a talk, you can go through those techniques, but they do not happen naturally. So when you're able to have those happening naturally because of your positive beliefs, it enables you to be your best in those times. And that is really what is our aim, is to not only equip you with tools, but to enable you to naturally live your best life. We also, of course, run many workshops for corporates focused around communication, building confidence, how to handle triggers and emotions, especially when you're dealing with difficult situations, often when you need to do things like coaching within the organization, how to better set boundaries, managing conflict, managing anxiety. Yes, and we're absolutely passionate and we love what we do. And for us, every client will have the absolute best life and outcome when we work together with them. Just before we move on to also the question session, yes, we are based in London, but I travel a lot. In fact, end of this month, I'll be in Boston, and then I'll also be in Chicago, and I'll be happy to really meet any of you that are based in other regions in person during my travels. You can just send me an email. Yes, so I think it's time to move on to the questions, Elizabeth.
Okay, well, thank you. We have quite a few. So I've got a couple of related questions from Felicia. And one really starts the topic by talking about, let's talk about triggers from past trauma. How do you tie in if this is something that you are having triggers from past trauma and something in a new environment or a new company triggers that? How do you react to the present versus the past? And then also taking it a little bit further, if you could just address, and how do you remove yourself from that environment without quitting your job? What might be some tools for that?
I mean, in terms of past triggers, then naturally, you know, if you've experienced trauma, you're going to be hyper vigilant to anything that's going to trigger that. And I mean, my best advice would be to work with someone that's going to be able to help you process the previous trauma so there actually isn't a trigger there at all. However, if you're not going to do that, then what I would suggest is there's a couple of techniques you can use. So if you start to feel yourself triggered,
Thanks. How are you? I'm good now.
oh, if you
That's
start to
good.
feel, oh,
Hi, oh, sorry, if everybody could mute themselves again, we're getting some extra conversation. Go ahead, Louise.
if you start to feel yourself becoming triggered, what you're going to be responding from is very much right brain, which is emotional brain. And what we want to do is try and get left brain more in gear, the logical side of things, because that's the one that tells you this is not the same situation as last time and I can respond differently. So what we want to do is what we call bilateral stimulation. So we tap either side of the body. Now this can be like the shoulders, you can do it on the side of the legs if you're in a meeting or something. That's just going to increase the brain's capacity to communicate between the two hemispheres, both left logical and right emotional. So just some side to side tapping, just to keep yourself a bit more in the present. I think I saw on the chat box someone mentioned about breathing. That's another really good one, is to be able to breathe and do the kind of, there's a really good one where you put your hands behind your head and you pull your arms out like this, and then you do the breathing that I said, in through the nose and out for a longer breath through the mouth. But that's just going to regulate your nervous system, which is going to allow you to be more present in the moment. If you really start to get triggered, another grounding technique can be to name things in the room, either out loud or in your head, just so that you start to come back into this present moment rather than the previous trauma moment that your brain is linking this to. Does that help at all? I think, was it Felicia that asked that question?
Yes, thank you. I know breathing helps calm things down if I'm feeling emotional, but it doesn't help long term. Like I think I'm thinking more long term of, sometimes I don't know there's the trauma from the past until the trigger already happened, and then I realize I reacted in the wrong way.
Absolutely. I mean, I would really, really recommend. I mean, what I tend to do with people is, have you heard of EMDR?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so that's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. What it does is it allows us to stimulate the same processes you have in REM sleep for traumatic. When we're in REM sleep, our brain sorts through the things that have happened during the day, and it stores us in the normal sort of way of memory consolidation. When something traumatic happens, it sort of sits in simplistic terms in our trauma network, ready to be easily triggered, because our brain thinks we need to know about this in case it happens again. So it needs to be easily accessible. So what you can use with EMDR is stimulation so that it actually goes into normal memory consolidation. So actually those triggers don't trigger you anymore. So that's the permanent kind of solution, Felicia, is we're talking about management here. If you want sort of a permanent solution, then something like that's going to be your best bet for managing those. And then you won't have them in the first place to be triggered. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I'll look into that.
Louise, maybe just to add to that, the technique that we use to identify those triggers is the stress test to the brain. So we can go back and we can actually see when those kind of events happen that's holding you back now by testing whether it causes a stress reaction to your brain.
Okay, I've got two more questions I think we have time for, and then if others come in and we have some additional, I will get to those as well. So first, just to take it to a higher level, Kendra has a great question here, is how to think about this if the trigger is actually at a macro level and it is ongoing. For example, all of the we see the media, things that are ongoing like geopolitical traumas, stress in the news, rise of nationalism or racism across communities. How do we take this advice and move it to that level to have tools for ourselves?
I would say then your best way to look at to work with that is to work on the vagus nerve, as I said previously, because the more tolerant you are to stress, the more you're going to be able to deal with it, because there is a huge overwhelm, isn't there, at the moment of this is disastrous, that we've just come out of the COVID situation, there's all sorts of other disastrous things happening. and it is just overwhelm. So personally, and I know a lot of neuroscientists do this, I will monitor and moderate my exposure to things like that. I'll keep abreast of certain things, but I'm not someone that's going to have the news on all the time, because it's not, psychologically, it's overwhelming, and it can be traumatizing for people. So I would moderate how much exposure you're having to that, but I would also do a lot of work on the vagus nerve, because that really is going to make you more resilient to all sorts of stress and less likely to be traumatized. So kind of going through exercise, and there's all sorts of things on YouTube that you can find out about how to stimulate the vagus nerve. But yes, the more vagal tone you have, the more you're going to be able to cope with whatever's thrown at you. Oh, Elizabeth, I think you're on mute.
Mute you.
Of course I am. There you go. Sally also put in a question, which is kind of a perennial important topic for people, which is about bullying. So how do you handle a bullying situation in the workplace that is condoned by an executive, still continues, even if it's reported to HR? What's our tools for this?
I would be looking, because the thing with bullies is they will tend to pick out the target that they perceive they can get away with. So if you've kind of gone down all the sort of usual channels and that's not worked, I would be looking very much at, and it sounds very simplistic, but it really does work. How are you holding your body when you're around this person? What are you, because they will identify targets. And actually, when I've worked with people in similar situations, we've done a lot of work on actually their body language, because people are less likely to target people where they feel that there's a danger that there'll be a negative response. So I don't know, who was it who asked this question?
Sally.
Sorry, it was me, Sally Gainey. It wasn't, the executive was condoning the behavior and allowing his people to bully. So he wasn't directly, because I think he was a little bit afraid of me, but he gave his own group permission to, push against, no, I'm not going to do that. I mean, literally, it was probably one of the most awful positions I've ever been in. But to me, he would be all buddy, but literally that group was a dotted to me. So it was one of those solid dotted relationships. The two executives who were peers, hated each other. I mean, it was like a huge open war. It was wild and not fun.
No, and how did you, in terms of your response, it sounded like you put your boundaries in place.
I did, and so what ended up happening was, so I did go to HR, to the head of HR, right? And as I told him when I left, because my choice was to take a step out of the workforce. It was during COVID. It was, this is the first 8 months of COVID. So everything was done over the phone and over video conference. And so it was one of those really strange situations. I was fortunate enough that the company was offering an unbelievably attractive a package for the executives to step out. So I chose to step out. I don't think I've ever forgotten it. And the reason why I got on the call, because I really am retired now, was to figure out how to help other women, because this is going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. And it's not just person to person. Sometimes it's groups. And while the organizations are structured as dotted and solid lines, if the executives who are in the dotted, above you don't like each other, they put that pressure on all the people working for them. And, I don't know, I worked out a nice deal with the company too, in addition to the actual package, but that wouldn't have been the way I would have wanted to go on and go out, right? I would have liked to have been able to systematically stop it from happening. And it was absolutely impossible in that culture to do that.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Sally. That is one of those times when it's actually time to remove oneself from the situation. I think, if it's a situation, like I said, where you've got someone that's, being critical, aggressive, that sort of thing, I've quite often worked with people about, boundaries, ensuring your body language is it is a bit like gorillas, when they sort of postulate and this sort of, we're very chimp-like, actually. We think we're a lot more evolved than we are. And actually, by making your body bigger, by standing up straight, people are less likely to pick on you. However, I think, Sally, in your situation, I think you're absolutely, I'm not sure what else you could have done if you've been to you know, the head of things and nothing's changed. I think that is a definite exit strategy. I'm just glad you got a good exit.
Yeah, it was actually brilliant.
Yeah, I think, Louise, it's also important to mention here that you often get to deal in leadership positions with narcissists, and there are
Oh,
specific
yes.
ways that these people need to be handled. And then, of course, when you start dealing with psychopaths, there's no other path than to effectively exit just for your own health.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're not going to make a change there. And it's accepting that that is not about you. That is not a failure on your part. That is because of them. And yes, I mean, I've worked with a guy recently that, you know, he felt a real failure because he couldn't work with this guy was a blatant narcissist, absolutely hideous human being. You know, and he had all this shame about the fact that he couldn't tolerate this, he couldn't work with this. Actually, nobody could. I'm pretty resilient. I couldn't deal with that.
Yeah,
Well, thank
and Sally, just coming back to your question around women, I think it's very important there that more women are confident to implement boundaries, because that I see as one of the biggest areas why they find themselves in those kind of positions, because they bully it.
We were taught to be nice. Women generally taught to be nice and compliant.
Very good.
So, Elizabeth, are you about to tell us we're out of time, aren't you?
Yes, well, we're at the end of the session, but I also, Ilse, can you move to your next slide? I just wanted to make sure that if people have questions, that they can get your contact information. For those of you that are, we've have a couple questions about the recording. We will make the recording will be available to everybody who registered as well. But I think importantly, there are some topics here that if you would like to follow up, feel free to reach out to Louise and Ilse. And Ilse, would anything you'd like to say in closing? We really appreciate you being here today. Thank you for covering this topic with us.
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. It's a topic I'm absolutely passionate about, given my experience in the workplace. I'm out there to change that environment, to make happy workplaces happy places, and to spread the message that when your people are happy, you will certainly get those kind of outcomes. And, you know, anyone who wants to just have a chat with us about it and help us make that impact, that will be greatly appreciated.
Okay. And if anybody has questions, Ilse and Louise are both on LinkedIn, and their company is When Pigs Fly Coaching. And we appreciate everyone attending today. Thank you so much. And we will see you on a future HBSWA event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Great session.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.